G'day and welcome to Mark and Cars Porsche Talk podcast, the podcast where we talk all things Porsche, from air-cooled, water-cooled, rear engine, front engine, even mid-engine. There'll be something here for you. But most importantly, we're going to talk to the people who are passionate about our favourite brand. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen today, and if you've got any input, suggestions, comments, anything, please send me a message. You'll be able to catch me on nearly all social media platforms as Mark and Cars, or just send me an email. Anyway, let's get on with the podcast.
G'day everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm your host today, Mark, from the YouTube channel Mark and Cars. I've got a special guest who has joined us for episode 3, Lee Sibley. Lee, you need very little introduction for Porsche enthusiasts. You're sort of fairly prominent in the social space and conventional media space. So tell us a little bit about your background with Porsche and, why people would know you.
Well, Mark, I want to start by saying thank you for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure, and particularly to get on early doors as well, like you say, episode 3. So yeah, that really is my pleasure. So thank you, mate. Look, for me, my kind of Porsche history, I've been an automotive journalist now for about 10 years. I was lucky to get a job editing a 911 magazine, Total 911, for those that aren't familiar with it, back in 2012. And I mean, it's just been the most incredible journey since then. Met some fantastic people, obviously been lucky enough to drive some outrageous Porsche machinery, and loved every minute of it. And I don't really classify it as a job. It's just a serious hobby, if that makes sense,
Sure.
So just really lucky. And then just like through the other bits I do in terms of my YouTube channel and then the podcast and stuff, again, it's just kind of continuing that serious hobby, but just on other kind of platforms. So it's just
great.
Nothing short of good fun. So
I do recall some of the earlier issues of Total 911 when you very first, started editing, and I'm sure with a lot of people at that time was, we're talking 8 years ago, something like that, 7 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, 9 years ago. It'd be 9 years in September.
Yeah, I remember back then. Social media back then wasn't what it is today. And I remember opening up the magazines thinking, who's this young kid they've got doing this job? Yeah. It was for me, because traditionally,
exactly.
you know yourself, print media, they took a great risk with getting you in that job, in my opinion, purely because it was an old man's job, to edit a automotive magazine. Even the fringe ones like Total 911 is not your mainstream automotive media, but even those magazines, to take a risk on someone young and for you to then lift that magazine to the level it was when you moved on, it was, I take my hat off to you. You did a great job, and it was a worthwhile risk in my opinion.
That's I really respect you saying that, Mark, to be honest, because it is nice here. I suppose that there was a risk from the company's point of view because, I think the next candidate to apply for the job, in terms of how young they were still double my age. That was the next youngest person.
Sure.
So it was a risk, but I think as well, you have to remember that compared to a lot of other candidates that have been in the industry for a long time, I was more financially economical to employ.
I get it. Look, I'm an employer. I sympathise with that train of thought, right? No question.
Exactly that, And
instead of paying for a reputation, you're developing one. Basically, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and the company, I mean, it's been taken over now. It's part of a bigger PLC, but the company at the time was Imagine Publishing, and they had a very strong business model. I mean, it was in the same university town. I went to university. I'm down here in Bournemouth on the south coast. It's basically at the bottom, in the middle of England. And it was a really good university here. It has, it did have at the time, the very best media school in the country. So and obviously, as we were saying earlier on, the weather's not great in the UK, but it's probably fair to say it's best around where we are here. So I came to uni here and stayed a bit for the weather. I had a 18-month hiatus up in Bristol on another job. It was Fast Car Magazine, it's like a multi-mark enthusiast title.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But it, so the weather definitely pulled me back down, but obviously the job as well. And again, imagine they had this really good business model of employing people often that just fell straight out of uni into the job. And what they might lack in experience, they've more than got through, grit, power, determination to kind of succeed, and that kind of
enthusiasm as well. Let's face it, a young person coming in that job, like I'm sure whilst I said earlier it was a risk, it was a calculated risk, because if you weren't going to be able to step up to the job, there would have been an unending list of people that they could have just dropped you straight out and dropped another one in. And that's the ruthlessness of that industry, isn't it?
Without a doubt. And to be honest, again, I'm very kind of open about how things started for me. So in my first job in the industry up in Bristol, I was a staff writer, which is T-boy basically. And although I was the only person in that office to have a degree in multimedia journalism, I was the only person to have a GCSE in English, which is what obviously you get when you leave school. It was just run by the firepower of enthusiasts, which is awesome, don't get me wrong, but there's no money in publishing, and when you're a T-boy in publishing, you're in trouble quickly. So I had to leave and do something. And when I applied for the Total 911 job, which many would say I had no real right to do due to my age and inexperience, but in for a penny, in for a pound, as we say over here. And they basically gave me, I went for the job of editor, which was the job being advertised. And they said to me after my second interview, they said, look, you're too young to be an editor. You don't have the experience. But what we will do is we'll employ you under the title of deputy editor. You will assume the role of the editor. There's no one above you. In fact, there was no one below me at the time. It was a one-man sort of operation. But they said, we will give you 6 months to sink or swim. And if after 6 months, you'll show you can do the job, we'll give you the title of editor. Obviously, there'll be a little pay rise in there as well to reflect that. And if it doesn't work out, well, look, that's kind of fine. So I was happy with that. Like I say, going from a staff writer on another magazine to being given a chance to jump straight to the top, essentially, I was very happy to kind of take that.
Fantastic.
That risk, it was a risk from both ways, and I was made editor 3 months later, which I'm very proud about, and still hold on to it.
Yeah, I'd be hanging on to it with both hands and running. Now, now let's talk multimedia. Let's talk about your YouTube channel. I watch a little bit of it. Just mainly because your core content is my key interest, as any viewers of this podcast have well and truly know, and the reason you and I are talking. How has that evolved for you? How have you found that process?
That's really interesting, Mark. So to be quite honest, the reason I started the YouTube channel was because we had a features writer who I took under my wing, if you like, at Total 911. And Josh is a fantastic writer, good guy, good bloke. He decided to move on. And I said, well, look, we as a magazine, we need to take advantage of the digital age. We're an old media, if you like. And whilst there is definitely an audience, and I think there will always be an audience for dedicated specialist print media, I'm very passionate about that. There's an obligation, I think, if you like, to kind of have some sort of presence in this current world that we're in with video, basically. And the company just didn't want to do that. And I thought, well, that is a missed opportunity, not only for the title, but for me kind of personally.
Yeah, sure.
There's a different audience online. So I kind of did it a little bit of that, but I mean, it was, and kind of still is really, again, it comes back to that serious hobby. It kept me out of the pub. Simple as that. Kept me out of the pub, did some videos, it resonated. I was, again, just able to do what any good journalist does and work the contact book and see what comes up. And it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on it, because it's quite easy online with YouTube to get sucked into this rat race of content. Which, it makes content like a throwaway word. I prefer like the term video editorial, whereby it's more considered. And but it's easy to fall into this trap of, I've got to do a video once a week or every few days and, keep pushing it. But I think for me, I would rather just put something out whenever it's ready. So I could go 2 or sometimes 3 weeks without doing a video, but I'll know that when it does pop, it's a quality video, and again, I don't know how you feel about it. It'd be interesting for you to kind of answer your own question there, but I kind of feel you know, whatever you do, because YouTube, it's there forever. I think it's really important to be able to sit there in 20 years time, or be able to sit there in 20 years time, look back on your early videos and kind of go, you know, yeah, I'm still kind of proud about it, you know, and not think, God, what have I done? Or what was I talking about there, or something, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because, you know, like a lot of creators or influencers, or whatever term you want to use, or in your case, professional journalists, right? I think the pros and cons of the format of YouTube really have been, it brings the entry level so much lower. Anyone can do it. You don't need, you know, like you mentioned earlier, your book of contacts, you know, that's so someone like myself has been able to, through my enthusiasm, haven't had to quit my job and go to sink myself into my Porsche enthusiasm. What I've been able to do is knock on this on the side while I'm generating an income and living the rest of my life. So essentially enable my hobby and share that passion. We didn't really have a forum for this 10, 15, 20 years ago. So that side of it's pretty interesting. Sure, YouTube rewards consistency through, you know, sharing your video through like-minded people, that sort of thing. Yeah, that whole algorithm thing. I don't put a lot of value on it, because, you know, I can't see myself any time in the foreseeable future where monetization is going to generate enough of an income for me to enable me to have a lifestyle I enjoy through having a proper job. So, and I'm not a kid who is just going to go and, you know, ride his BMX downhill at 100 kilometres an hour and go off a jump and end up in hospital and get 4 million views out of it. You know what I mean? So So I'm not going. And again, like you mentioned with the print publication, niche print publication always having a home, the product I'm offering to YouTube, and to a degree yourself as well, we have a niche audience. It's not like we're ever going to be in the top 10 trending videos on YouTube because of the topic we talk about. It's very unlikely anyway, unless we're, you know, co-driving in a rally car that somehow Porsche won a WRC stage on or something like that. That's the only way we're going to end up in that type of situation. So as a result, I think that, so essentially for the type of product that we're putting up, it's two types. There's either vlog / disposable, watch once, never watch again type videos, or there's a production which is about a product as opposed to about a person. Yeah. I think that's pretty much how videos tend to fall these days. You know, sure, there's an educational factor, but you get that in the vlog stuff for a lot of people too. So, product versus person. To me, in my head, that's sort of how it works. And if you're going to do product, like you said, and you're going to hang your hat on it, spend the week in editing. If you're just going to do the person, you can edit the thing in 2 hours, throw it up. Interesting term, actually, now I've said that out loud. Put it up to YouTube, right? And see how it goes. Now, ironically, the disposable YouTube products seem to be the most viewed. You know, the biggest viewed videos are by far and away the people who vlog or do that type of thing. Even just in the automotive space, the biggest YouTubers are, you know, outside of Doug Demura, of course, you know, they are those vlogger style videos, you know, so. Yeah.
And that's the thing, you know, you make a really good point there because, you know, I've had to study it in the last sort of 6 months. You know, my numbers on YouTube in regard to like subscribers and whatnot, you know, they're fairly similar to yours. So I feel like, you know, we can discuss this with genuine parity, you know.
Yeah. And in reality, you mean, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But you kind of, you look at it and, you know, look at the numbers and, I mean, there's some stuff like I've done where I've interviewed Ben Dimpson, designer of the 964, the 959, the 3.2 Speedster. He doesn't work at Porsche anymore, which was great because he was able to kind of speak his mind. He didn't have to toe the company line. But sure. I mean, I that was a half an hour chat that I put up on YouTube. It's had less than 10,000 views, and really, you know, that is gold. But I don't mind that it's not kind of shut down the internet, because so long as it's appealed to the people that have watched it and the people that have watched it have found that an enjoyable way to spend some time, maybe furthered their Porsche knowledge, etc. Well, I'm happy with that. And it's like you say, I think you have to kind of choose your poison. If you want to go for the big hits, I would argue it's exactly that. You know, you go down the vlog style, you sacrifice kind of maybe quality of content in terms of production and whatnot. Or if you want something that I would argue might better stand the test of time, it's something that's a little bit more considered in terms of that production. And that is kind of the way forward. As you said, the real positive is with YouTube, everybody can have a go. And I think where it's particularly in kind of Porsche circles, it works really well is, like you say, your contacts has come from absolute sheer enthusiasm, and you are passionate to cover the brand and to cover other people's cars. And in a reciprocal way, they are passionate about you talking about their cars and covering the brand and stuff. And I think that's quite a magical thing, actually, you know.
It's one of the highlights. Talking about the brand, I haven't really spoken to anyone who's had both sides of the equation of the brand that you have. So I've got a few questions I'm pretty curious about hearing your viewpoint on, because, you're also running that balanced line of access versus opinion and where they go against each other, particularly with a German company, I can imagine. So look, historically, coming from traditional media, I imagine the majority of your discussions and contacts outside some of the technical personnel are purely with that marketing department of that monster that is the VAG group these days, So how do you find dealing with that?
It's particularly for specialist media. There is, some people think, well, you can't bite the hand that feeds you. But I think and particularly the people at Porsche, GB, as well as AG, obviously in Germany, but I tend to deal with GB more.
Sure.
There's a real mutual respect for each other's work. And
sure, that's good to know.
Look, my role as a journalist, and I would say this is for any realm of journalism, whether it's automotive or whether you're a newspaper or political editor, whatever it is, with journalism, you must speak the truth, whether it's good or bad. If you don't, you're PR. That is the difference between journalism and PR. And my role is a journalist, and sure. I have an obligation to, enthusiasts, readers, listeners, watchers, depending on the platform, to report the truth. And again, I think with regards to like Porsche GB, there's a real mutual respect there. So if I find something less than ideal, like I did with a Taycan, we're still trying to work out how to pronounce the thing. I've got no problems reporting that and saying that, that I think that, for example, that Taycan is a fantastic car as a product, but there's no infrastructure yet for that to be a feasible option for people, Do
you think that's more of a geographic issue as opposed to a vehicle product issue?
Yeah, without a doubt. So like, the fast chargers that Porsche, it's the Ionity network, that there's Porsche, Mercedes-Benz,
sure.
also the VW group, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, they're putting in this pan-European infrastructure, essentially to rival Tesla's superchargers.
Sure.
And there's a reason they're having to link up to do it, is because obviously Tesla's got such a march and a steal on the market so far. And they will be the game changer in terms of people, using an electric car as a practical alternative to a combustion engine vehicle. Now, at the start of lockdown last year, there were 8 of these chargers in the UK. Now, that is not enough. Some dealers have more than 8 Taycans on their forecourt ready to sell to people, but there are only 8 chargers. A year on, there are 13. Now, that I understand with infrastructure, these things do take time. And I commend the people that have bought these cars because they've adopted this new lifestyle. And that's what it is. It's you have to adopt a new lifestyle to run these cars. They're doing it early, which is great. But from my point of view, it's just absolutely not an option at the moment to drive that sort of car. There's simply not the infrastructure.
Interesting. Look, this is going off a slight tangent because of the car you've brought up. And I spent last night editing a Taycan Turbo video that I did a review on. Okay, so it's fresh in my mind. I only drove it last week. Here in Australia, actually, I won't say Australia. I'll say Perth because I'm in my little bubble here in Western Australia.
Yeah,
the electric car uptake has probably been on par with the rest of Australia as a percentage of sales, but they tend to be more premium cars like the Taycan, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. And the higher end Teslas. I don't see a lot of Model 3s getting around, or even any. I don't think Model Ys have even come to Australia yet. I might, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if anyone's watching or listening to this. But when you buy one of those cars here, everyone puts the charger in at home. And the reason I brought up the geography thing is it might be because of the way the homes or the existing electrical infrastructure and its age affect this ability to do so. Like the concept of, I would never, whilst my wife and I discussed buying an electric car because we replaced her daily driver not so long ago.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have even been on my radar to rely on the existing infrastructure. And, we live in the most isolated city in the world, so I don't know what the charging facilities are like here in West Australia. If you told me there was an Ionity charging station in Perth, I don't know where it is, but I would find out if I was in the market to buy one of these cars, obviously, okay? Yeah. Audi have gone hard on their e-tron products here in the marketing and everything, so I'll make the assumption those chargers do exist around somewhere. I still, in a very simplistic, probably old man mentality, why don't I have an adapter so I can just go turn the Tesla thing and plug it in, But that aside, the whole concept of not having one at home is just baffling to me. And the other part of it is, I use a mobile phone. You might be familiar with them, right? And I get my car and I put it in a tray and it charges. Why can't I have a mat in my garage and I park my car over and it charges? Could it be more complex? You know what I mean?
Well, and you're right that people put the chargers in at home, and actually in this country there is still a government subsidy. They're just reducing it actually, but they want people to do it, and that's fine. But it's still the whole idea of electric cars for me. It takes away the spontaneity of driving. So if you I mean, to me, like, driving is meditation. It's just, especially with all these lockdowns and stuff, sometimes the idea of concept of just jumping in a car and going for a drive is absolutely beautiful for the mind.
Sure. Yep.
And but say you want to do it with an electric car and you end up going a little bit further than you should. Well, with the petrol cars, in this, I don't know if you've heard of the phrase, splash and dash, quick fill up and off you go.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't do that.
No, you definitely can't. 100%.
If you've got business meetings like I have to do, all over the country, you have to plan your stops. And whilst the manufacturers, not just Porsche, they're selling you the dream of, you can stop for a coffee. And you think, well, how many coffees do I really need in a day? And I won't dwell on it for too long. But when I had a Taycan, I had an absolute nightmare charging the thing. And similarly to where you have different petrol stations, you might have Gulf or Shell or whatever. There's, there are different brands, but they all sell the same stuff, right?
Yes.
So you can still just splash and dash and off you go.
Yeah.
With the electrification, all these different companies are trying to take a steal on the market. So depending on who the charger belongs to, you might have to have a certain fob or be a member, or all of this sort of stuff. And then, so I had an absolute nightmare with this Taycan where I realised quite quickly, well, I'm not signed up to any of these. I don't have the membership card come through the post because I've had this car, or I've got the car for 48 hours. I then had to limp to a Porsche dealership, try and nick some juice in the dealership. COVID was going on. It was a rare boiling hot day in the UK. I had to sit in the sweltering car. I couldn't have the aircon on because it drained the battery while it's charging. Couldn't go inside because of COVID, like I said.
Sure.
I then had to get enough juice, which I sat there for like an hour and got a ridiculous amount of range, like 20, 30 miles. It was absolutely a complete waste of time. It basically gave me enough juice to limp to a motorway services 40 miles out the way of where I needed to go. And then there were only 2 charge points. So I had to queue for 45 minutes till somebody in front of me was done with the charger, then I could use it. And you just go, in what like, this is madness. This is absolute madness. So
sure.
to take it back to your question, it is my job to report on that. And sometimes...
Sure.
And I think another thing I would add, that in this day and age, institutions, and that includes Porsche, but it's not limited or exclusive to Porsche. This is in all walks of life, not just automotive. Institutions are looking after their own PR more and more. And the PR department, the role, rather than being reactive to the journalist, is now being proactive in the editorial or the content or the slant that goes out. And I mean, that's kind of quite a dangerous thing. And I think that's why the role of a journalist is more important than ever, because the journalist has to be able to say, well, actually, that's not quite right, and hold these companies to account. And I actually think that is to the benefit of people like Porsche, because journalists, when they drive these cars and go, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it improves the product. So it does all feed in, providing the brand is willing to listen. But to go back to a question, I think I'm lucky to have a very good relationship with a manufacturer whereby they know, I love the brand. Obviously, I love the brand, but I have to say when I think things aren't quite right, or if, products could do with improving or whatever. And that doesn't mean, it's not a case of biting the hand that feeds you, and it means I'll never be given a car to review again. It means I would like to think I'm respected for giving my opinion.
Sure. Yeah. So you don't think you're going on their brown list?
No, I think if you start worrying about that, and again, there is a perpetual debate, isn't there, with regards to YouTubers and influencers, which is an awful term. I mean, everybody is an influencer, because we've all influenced at least one person in our lives. So, but in influencers,
especially if we're parents.
Exactly that, first and foremost, by virtue of that alone, every parent on the planet is already an influencer. So, these people that are called influencers online, I think it's a bit farcical, really. But
just if I can just pause you for a second there, I just want to make a note. Any kids out there listening, this just proves Dad is cool.
Yeah.
So that's key.
Yeah, the dads have got to be the coolest, right? That's how it goes. But, there is this kind of accusation, rightly or wrongly, that's been put to YouTubers or influencers, whereby they just say everything's great because they given the keys to these cars or whatever it is. But, again, I think for those people, it's down to them as individuals to work out how do they want to be viewed in 10, 15, 20 years. That's
that point you just brought up about the YouTubers getting flown to places and given keys to cars and for press launches in as well as or in place of traditional media of the last 2 or 3 years. It's been quite obvious how the manufacturers, and I'm not talking about just Porsche here, are very specific about who they bring and who they don't bring next time because of the result of the videos that get launched or whatever. And look, this is no criticism or generalisation by any means, but prominent UK auto YouTubers seem to be get consistent invites where the Americans get dropped off the face of the earth pretty quickly. And that, I think that's because of just the personality types and the upbringing of the Americans are going, this is crap, man. Whereas the English should be a bit more, I guess, around the edges type thing. So I find it quite interesting, with that discussion point you've brought up, that's all.
Yeah, and I see it from both sides, as you kind of said at the top of the chat, and I would put that down to it just in terms of the amount of people that can get to these things. I would say that's the work of the PR department, and actually those people are therefore very good at their jobs, because I've seen the struggles that they have. Say there's a new GT3 launch, for example. As in a first drive, and Porsche Germany will dictate to Great Britain how many seats are on the plane. We can accommodate X amount of journalists, and then they have to work out the most bang for their buck. Obviously I have suffered as a result of that, because if they've got 4 seats, well, they're not going to take the editor of Total 911. They're going to take a freelancer that can write for Total 911 and GT Porsche and 911
and whoever,
and that's it, and so it comes down to bang for your buck. The idea of the influencers, if you like, the YouTubers going along, I do personally think that is dangerous territory, but then I've heard retorts from them saying, well, actually, magazines, they're institutions in their own right where they've got a duty to advertisers, so can what they're saying be trusted? It's poison.
Yeah, sure. Now, I listen to Redline, which is, for those who don't know, Lee's one of a few people who are the hosts of that podcast. I quite enjoy it. I think you got a pretty good mix of personalities involved, which well done.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, Joe and Andy, my co-presenters' heads will be getting bigger by the minute.
And I told you someone listened. But look, from what I hear, and on Road to Redline, whilst the other two guys are quite less diplomatic about where their heart sits on in the Porsche structure and what cars they prefer. You know, you're pretty, you know, you could be a politician, you know, with the way everything's not bad and everything's not good, rather than, my goodness, this one's getting buried in the coffin with me mentality, right?
Right. Yeah.
Tell me, how do you sit with your air-cooled versus water-cooled audiences, and tell me, how do you feel about that? You know, how is the old air-cooled cars, because, you know, often you're brought in as an expert in the conversations because of your exposure to the vehicles, which inherently involves the latest and greatest. So you definitely come across as being heavily leaning that way, but I also suspect it's because that's where your expertise lies. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there, Mark. I would say, I mean, it's been a running joke, isn't it, on Road to Redline? I'm not sure where it's perpetuated from, but in terms of being like extremely pro water cooled and very anti-air cooled, which is absolutely not the case at all. I mean, the air cooled is
just have a look over there, right? So
this is it. Yeah, I've got to be careful here, haven't I, with the 356 in the background. But no, I mean, like I say, it's a bit of a running joke, and I think that's the thing with Road to Redline, and certainly in difference to the other media stuff I do, is it's a little bit more sort of pub chat. It's you know, a bit more colloquial. We can have a bit of fun with it. You know? Mm-hmm. And it's basically taken into the form of some mickey taken with these kind of views. I mean, the reality to me, like I say, the air-cooled cars, they are quintessential 911. There's no getting away from it. I think where I have been the voice of particularly the 996, the first water-cooled cars, is the sense that I love an underdog. And this whole kind of 996 movement that I've kind of tried to start, or been very vocal in favour of, it basically got down to where I was sick of all these events whereby it was exclusive parking. You know, you had to basically submit or you know, send a picture of your car to the organisers of whatever event was going on, and you basically had to tell them how cool you were by showing them what car it was.
What events are these? I've never heard of an event that you have to do this to.
Yeah, you know, so all of these paint to sample nonsense sort of events. And, you know, to be honest, I remember Magnus Walker, obviously, I've done a few bits of him over the years. I remember chatting with him about it. And I think we share similar views in that regard, that Porsche as a brand, it's an inclusive brand. It's not an exclusive brand, you know. There's room for absolutely everybody. And there are, you know, I've had, you know, leaflets and flyers stuck to the car, you know, send in your thing and we can put you on display on this show. And it'd always be some a paint sample GT car or an old, you know, an air-cooled car, whatever. Sure. And these kind of the entry level in terms of the 911, the entry level cars like the 996 and the 997, they kind of get left behind. And to me, like I say, I know I love an underdog anyway, but I don't think that's fair. And I think today's 996 or 997 owner could be tomorrow's 993 or 964 RS owner. You never know. You just don't know people's journey and where life is going to take them.
Well, ironically, on that point you've just brought up about the 996, 997, because look, here in Australia, that is your entry point into 911 ownership financially. Yeah. Okay, and in all reality, it's not going to be long until it's actually 997, not 996, the way the prices have been escalating on 996 cars of late. And that whole, like, to drive, outside a couple of creature comforts that you get used to on modern cars, they still drive like a modern car. So the performance is, you know, we're talking low fives, high fours, depending on which generation you get with 0 to 100 or 0 to 62. So the cars are fast cars. Sure, people say, oh, yeah, but my Golf GTI TCR does it in 4.1 or whatever. So, you know, what are you talking about here? You can't even blink in a second, you know. So as a result, the actual dynamic of experience of ownership is so good, you know what I mean? So, and the car's going to be faster than you can drive most of the time anyway, let's face it. And as you get more modern cars, who can make the most of that capability out on the road?
That's exactly my point, you know, and where there's this kind of rush among owners over, say, 991.2 GT3 owners over the past year have been quietly siphoning off the car back into the network because they're trying to get ready for the 992 GT3 and be put in the good eyes of the dealer and stuff. And I mean,
Sure.
you know, unless you are Lars Kern, who would lap the Nürburgring in the time he did in the 992 GT3, there's just no way you're going to jump out of the 991.2 GT3 and go, I just need a bit more GT3.
Yeah, what else have you got?
Yeah, exactly that. You know, so it blows my mind, that sort of thing. But I think,
I
you know,
couldn't possibly drive a McPherson Strut front end again.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, you know, it's exactly my point, you know. But to go back to your kind of question and that, I mean, like I say, the air-cooled cars, they are phenomenal. I'd love to own one, and I absolutely will one day. I've got a real hankering for a yellow, that doesn't really matter what shade of yellow, a yellow G-bodied Targa, because like I say, where I am down on the coast, that would be in addition to my 996. Sure. Because just a wonderful boulevard cruiser, obviously the 915 gearbox that'd have to be reconditioned, because everybody knows the stories of the recalcitrants, particularly when cold, when they're old. But you know, so it'd have to have a good 915 gearbox to it. And it's just a lovely car, boulevard cruiser, so in the corners together, gives you that kind of the top-down experience, but it's, in my mind, the classic cars in terms of open top, the Targa's the better one to go for. The Cabriolet, obviously, the shape's just absolutely not there.
Sure. Interesting you say about a yellow Targa, G-body yellow Targa, because I don't know how you are going to convince one of the 4 owners that ever ordered one in yellow to sell it.
Well, this is it. Joe, there was a lovely one that came up at a specialist down the road from me, maybe 18 months ago. And I mean, that was part of the thing that sold it. I mean, and the photography was amazing as well. It was a beautiful summer's day. And I was like, that is the car for me. Yeah. But, you know, like I said, you don't know where life's going to take you. You know, I'll have one day without a doubt. But that's my point. You know, it's not like I have any real aversion to air-cooled cars. I absolutely love them. They are phenomenal. But equally, the air-cooled cars and the air-cooled community doesn't need me to wax lyrical about the
definitely doesn't.
Porsche. There are so many people doing it. It doesn't need my voice. That's not to say I have a dislike towards the car. It just me adding my voice to it is going to do nothing. What I am saying is, well, hey, for half the price, if you're looking at a 993, for half the price, a 996, it's incredible value for money, and it's quicker, it's faster, it's lighter, it's more economical, and
it's got air conditioning that works. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's, and I love throwing all those bits in just to see like 993 enthusiasts squirming their seat a little bit. But the 993 is a fantastic car. As I say, there is a car out there for everybody, and Porsche is really good at doing that, isn't it, and offering that. So
yeah, sure. How do you feel? How do you feel about the energy it's been put into the products like Singer and Gunther Works for those, older, I want to say the most modern of the air-cooled cars, and, there's clearly an audience for it because they're selling the cars. And, you talk to people or you listen to people like Chris Harris, where he's just, hallelujah, holds it up, like a church in the choir for the church type thing on how good these cars are. And look, the reality is very few of us will ever get behind the wheel of one. I don't know if you've had the opportunity, but the photography and videography of any Singer you ever see is just to die for if you're a Porsche person.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we were fortunate that Rob Dickinson, obviously the proprietor at Singer Vehicles.
I did hear him. Yes, I heard him on one of your podcasts only not long ago.
Well, that's it. I mean, he guest edited, I don't know if you'll be able to see actually, but he guest edited the 200th issue of Total 911. He signed a copy via a friend of the issue and signed it for me, which was very, very nice, very thoughtful thing to do. But, he or Singer's mantra, as everything is important. And I learned that is absolutely very much the case. When he guest edited the issue of Total 911, I genuinely handed over the reins of that magazine to him. And every last sentence that went into that publication really mattered, which of course it should. So, I mean, look, as Ben Dimson said to me, just going back to my interview with him, I asked him about the Singer cars because he designed the 964.
Sure, which is based on.
Yep. There. Yeah, and then, and he raised a really valid point, and that's that, well, Ben Dimson and his team, that was only a small team at the time, I think there's probably more people now working on a Singer than there was working on a Porsche 964 at the time. They built the very best 911 they could of the time according to budgets and constraints regarding safety, emissions, blah, blah, blah. And Singer is doing it now where they're certainly not constrained by budgets. It's as simple as that. So if you're given complete free rein to design the 964 of your dreams, well, you know, Singer have got it bang on, haven't they? But they're afforded a space in which to do that. And to be fair, Rob even said in his interview with us on Road to Redline that Singer's incredibly lucky, as is Good for Works, to have that clientele to say, well, look, so like the ACS project with Singer, some customer was, you know, potty enough to say, don't really care what it costs, let's do it.
I've got all the money in the world. Can you spend it for me, please? Yeah,
exactly that. So it's, I mean, I think it's great. I think the detrimental, the downside of certainly the Singer stuff where they're working on 964s is the values of 964s just have not stopped going up and up and up. And the reason is it's getting harder and harder and harder to find a good one. I mean, now if you are looking for, particularly in this country, a good manual coupe non-sunroof 964 C2, you know, especially with low miles, you're knocking on six figures. And let's not forget that same car in 2012, 2013 was worth less than 20 grand.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? And don't get me wrong, part of that is people have realized just how awesome the 964 is as a real sweet spot between classic and modern.
Sure.
But the fact is where these companies, and not just Singer, there are companies, there's a load of them in the UK, essentially evoking a Singer car. So they're copying a copy or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. And it just means these cars are so hard to find and come by. So I think it's great that people are doing it. But, you know, there's the originals are good cars as well, you know.
Tell me, what you guys don't talk about much on Road to Redline, which inherently comes from its name, I guess, essentially, is it's not a lot of track talk, which inherently is a lot of discussion of track talk amongst Porsche enthusiasts and purists, and you know this whole, look, I don't necessarily agree with it, but the concept of developing the best balance between a car you can drive on the road and go to the track with. But you know, to me, each time I've driven cars that are one way or the other too much, they compromise either too much rather than add to the experience of either too much. And so, and as a result, I could never imagine ever aspiring to a GT3 RS. GT3 is borderline for me because of the comfort factor, you know, and again, my limited driving ability combination. But, you know, for me personally, I would rather get a nice road car and then just get a track specific car. I know that I'm not going to have to nurse at the track through fear of not being able to drive at home. You know, I'd rather trailer a track specific car that's a lot cheaper than a road car that I'm going to wreck at the track, you know. So just because you guys don't discuss it that often, I'm interested in your opinion about that whole mix of the two and, you know, essentially what Porsche was built on as a brand, you know.
Yeah, well, exactly that, you know, and in difference to what you've just said, to be fair, Mark, you know, the whole point of a Porsche is, in terms of its engineering integrity, is these cars are built to be driven to the track, round the track, and then home again. But if you wish to trailer yours, then that's kind of fine if at any point you get a track car. But look, you know, yeah, I think it's a really good point in regards to Road to Redline. I mean, obviously, Joe has got a 987 Cayman that he shares with a pal. You know, we've all smashed that around Silverstone a couple of times, which I think has been well documented. We have actually got some track content coming up. It's, I think, something that we need to dedicate an episode to, more than one, but like as in just focusing on it generally. I think though, particularly where we're only into Series 2, and obviously it resonates with what you're doing. When you start a project, you want to appeal to as many people as possible.
Yes.
And we have found, and I'm well versed in this through our stuff in the magazine where we've done surveys and asked for feedback. For some people, track driving with their Porsche, not on the agenda. Never has been, never will be.
Yep.
You know, I love track driving. I haven't been able to do any last year due to COVID, obviously, but I cannot wait to get back on the track and have some fun. But yeah, you know, like I say, where we've started and we've focused on other bits and pieces and other corners of culture, but for some people with regards to track days, there's no interest. And so we don't want to early on shut people off again.
Alienate them, sure. Yeah, good point. I hadn't considered that, and it's an excellent point you've brought up. Have you ever bought a brand new Porsche?
No, I'm not sure I would, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was going to be my next question. Would you, you know?
I don't know how, you know, I mean, I like to own my cars outright, which is, I think, half the battle with the modern stuff. And even if you can afford, as I'm sure enthusiasts, particularly in this country, will vouch for, Porsche still likes you to put stuff on the drip because it's more beneficial for those guys, isn't it?
Sure.
But I mean, beside the whole thing of, the cover being whipped off and here's your car and stuff, it's just, it's not for me. And I think particularly where cars are going, I think the older stuff's more fun to drive. And I think that's where the appeal is, So, I mean, I definitely thought particularly when I was early on into my job and the 991.1 was the car that graced showrooms. I mean, they just, I could own one of these one day.
Yeah, sure.
And I'd probably like to as an everyday car. I think they're fantastic. A C4S with PDK at 40k, 45k now they are in this country. Phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But obviously they're not new anymore. So,
the only reason I bring that up is there's one spec requirement I have if I was to buy a modern 911, and that is ventilated seats. Have to have it, right?
Yeah.
But no one specs it, So, like I've only ever seen one used 991 with ventilated seats, So, and I just,
and especially, I mean, the 99. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, I was just the whole thing of the not getting the ventilated seats. I couldn't bring myself to spend that much money on a car that my Volkswagen Tiguan has a feature of. So so it's, I don't know. There's a funny thing in my head on that.
There are some weird and wonderful specs out there. I was sent a link to a car that's been sold at a specialist only last week, and somebody was asking for their opinion on it. And it had a sport chassis, but just it was a 991.1.
Sure.
It had a sport chassis, but just the Bogo 4-way adjustable seats, not even the sport seats plus. And you just go, someone is basically happily put in a firm ride, but then is just happy.
And then happy to roll around in the car.
Yeah, with no support, and that's maybe that's a feature we could do in the magazine or on the podcast, is kind of maybe looking at the minefield of specs, because there are people do make wrong decisions. I mean, especially in this country, Carrera T is a real driver's car. The amount of Carrera T's that are PDK, glass roof, and the rear seats in the back, and you just think that is so far removed from what that car is meant to be.
You've turned into a really expensive Carrera, haven't you?
Which is exactly it. And so how do you differentiate it? But again, the market, certainly in this country, does reflect that, because a manual Carrera T, coupe, tin top, i.e. no sunroof, with the proper seats, there is a real premium for those cars, if indeed you can find them. So, I don't know. Would you buy a car new, Mark? I'd like to know your answer to that.
Look, we have this thing in Australia called luxury car tax, which means our cars are a lot more expensive than just about anywhere else in the world, and it takes a long time for a car to have depreciated enough to justify, particularly Porsches, because they don't depreciate that badly compared to a lot of other European brands, to make them attractive enough for someone to buy it from, say, the UK. So not a lot of cars come from Australia to go to the UK. They tend to be a lot older, air-cooled stuff, that type of thing. This means that because of that luxury car tax, like the Taycan, and we don't get subsidies here for electric cars either. Okay. So to give you an idea, the Taycan I reviewed last week was with its options, which weren't off the chain. They were a mid-range set of options, leather pack, that sort of thing. Nothing completely off the chain, completely ridiculous. Yeah. I think it was like $350,000 Australian, which I guess is about £150, £160. Now, I know that car's not that much money there, it's the same with the 911s. And like I reviewed the 992, how long ago was that? That was probably 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. That car there was, I think, $360,000 Australian. It's Carrera S, and that's a lot of money, It's like, I think I'd get better value out of buying 2 or 3 good Porsches that I could get a stable of good quality driving experiences for that much money if I was ridiculous enough to spend, median house price on one car. You know,
that's exactly my point. You know, when it comes to a new car, you know, for all of the fancy coffee and that kind of thing, it's irrelevant.
What does appeal to me is getting the spec I want. That part of the new car really does appeal to me. But I think if you're patient, it'll pop up.
Without a doubt. And again, particularly like going back to the 991 and how I was waxing lyrical about how good value the Gen 1 cars are, last naturally aspirated 911 as well, of course. I mean, it's the most populous 911 on the planet. 1 in 5 911s are a 991 generation car. So you would hope that your desired spec would pop up eventually, you know, in your case.
Well, statistically it has to, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is it. So, you know, and again, and therefore, if you were then going to hypothetically, you know, rank up to that 992 cost, you've still got a good chunk of money in the bank to, like you say, you know, kit out the stable of your dreams when it comes to.
You could buy 2 991s here for the price for 992.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
You know, realistically, that's like, right now, you know, like all Porsche enthusiasts, I browse classifieds, you know, whatever platforms there are anywhere. I'm always looking, you know, and I think the cheapest 991 in Australia at the moment is about $139,000 Australian. Okay. You know, that's that's a 2012 car PDK.
Yes.
Black interior, silver exterior. You know, I think the next one up, I think there's about 27 white ones after that in the next $10,000 that you could buy, you know, because everyone wanted the Stormtrooper spec, and don't forget to wrap my roof.
Right,
in black, you know. So, well, you know what I mean. So you see them everywhere. But but that aside, the cars still haven't dropped in value, as in my opinion, as they should have, because of the point you brought up about how many of them there are. There are just a zillion 991s out there, and you know, I really thought that would bring the car down to an affordable price point, but hasn't.
I mean, again,
when I say affordable, that's relative, and that's affordable to me.
Yeah. But you know, again, I think things that work in that car's favour. Again, the Gen 1, it's the last naturally aspirated 911. They sound fantastic. They're still extremely reliable. The interior holds up really well. Doesn't look particularly dated. It has the previous PCM, obviously, that isn't compatible with Apple CarPlay, which can be a bit of a problem.
Sure.
But, you know, it's still an absolutely fantastic car that holds up really, really well. You know, it's a quality car. It's an absolute quality car.
What do you think is going to be the next Porsche you purchase?
See, this, again, it comes down to lifestyle, Mark, doesn't it?
Do you have kids?
No, see, I'm avoiding it for as long as I can and just enjoying the toys. But I'd like to do it at some point, don't get me wrong.
I made the mistake of avoiding it as long as I could. Just do it.
Well, do you know, somebody else said this to me really recently. Do it, and maybe getting it out of the way is the wrong thing. But you can
do it and deal with it. That's what you know.
Well, yeah, this is it. But
you need someone to influence.
Exactly that. Yeah. So I will be a bona fide influencer then. Yeah, exactly. You know, like I say, Mark, all in good time. I'm 32, so I'm just trying to enjoy myself for now, as is my wife. You know. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it comes down to lifestyle, doesn't it? And kind of what you want. And I've got no plans to get rid of my 996, really enjoying the journey with that and that project. I would like maybe something that's a better daily over the 996. So again, as I said, a 991.1 C4S PDK as a Cabriolet, I think ticks every single box. So that would be nice. But again, there is an itch to scratch for an air-cooled car, and I've got this weird thing for 993 Cabriolets at the moment. It's bizarre.
There's an interesting one. There's an interesting one for sale here in Perth at the moment. A yellow, speed yellow, 993 Cabriolet with it's got like a hard top on it. Now, I don't know if this person said this made, because I'd never seen one before, or it could be one of those really bizarre tech art options or something like that. I'm guessing, you know, but it looks almost like a coupe from the photo angles that are used to sell it. It's an auto and Tiptronic car. I'll find a picture of it and send it through to you. I've never seen a hard top or like an optioned hard top on a 993 Cabriolet. What I find baffling about the UK enthusiasts, and this isn't just Porsche, this is just across all brands. You guys, you have this obsession with cabriolets over there. It's just for your 4 days of summer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's really weird. It's really, and I tell you what as well. What's even more bizarre, particularly around this part of the world where I live. I'm not from here as well, so I feel qualified to say it. But I mean, there are people that drive around in cabriolets that have all the windows tinted. And like I say, this isn't because of our climate. It's so hot, they need to stay cool inside. So it's a case of, one day they want to show off to everyone. It might be, God knows, whatever it is, some drop top Bentley, whatever. And they want everyone to see how cool they are. And then in the next minute, they've got tinted windows and you just go, in what world does that work? But yeah, we are bizarre. We make a habit of purchasing wrong cars for the country, I suppose. But I mean, look, the 993 Cabriolet, it's a bizarre, absolutely a bizarre choice. I'm well aware of it. But I think what resonated with me, and I mentioned it on our Road to Redline podcast, is Andreas Preuninger has one. Dr. Frank Stefan Volliser, the head of the 911 production line, he has one. Kuno Werner, who's part of their museum team, helped restore chassis number 57. He has one. And they're just like awesome little dailies for all these.
Mate, it sounds to me like you just want to be one of the cool kids.
Well, this is it. Yeah, I mean, I haven't got the beard or the tattoo for it, unfortunately. But yeah, maybe a 903 cab might offer some respite. But
mate, I thought you were going to say Kim Kardashian's got one after that list.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, maybe she has, but yeah, this
funny.
Again, it comes down to lifestyle, doesn't it? And kind of what you want. The reality is there are a million different options, and
sure.
As I said, Porsche made a car for everybody. So depending on what the situation is at the time, but
sure.
Yeah. What about you anyway? Like, I know I'm chucking the questions back at you, but
I'm glad you are. It turns from an interview to a conversation, so
exactly that.
Yeah. And look, I think because of costs and where my lifestyle is and that type of thing at the moment, I do want to buy a 911, but I want to buy probably a G series. I'd like a 993, right? But they're just too expensive for me. And I used to work quite a number of years ago for VDO instruments, make dashes and gauges and stuff.
Amazing. Yeah.
So I got a lot of exposure to a lot of Porsches and a lot of European cars. And I much prefer a 993 over a 964, even though 964s have leapfrogged them in value here in Australia, and it seems to be a bit of a pattern everywhere in all reality, probably because of the Singer thing we spoke about earlier. But I really like the 993 driving dynamic. I like the size of the car, but I struggle to see the value in that car at the moment with how expensive the car costs. So I think, probably a G series body manual. I'd like a 3.2. I've driven a lot of 915 gearboxes, and I've driven G50s. I don't appreciate the premium that you pay to get into a G50. I think the problem with a lot of 915s is Porsches are that good. They haven't been, so many of them haven't been restored and fixed, and the car's 40 years old, for Christ's sake. So any other brand of car would have had its gearbox fixed by now. So the fact that they're just blown out each time, because you mentioned the 915 would have to be sorted if you were to get one. I think, most of the good ones are already sorted, and if they're not, they are due to be sorted. Thinking it's okay to drive a gearbox that's got, 216,000 miles on it and it's going to be okay, I think is a bit delusional. So I am going to have to fix that problem if I buy one. And I'm relatively handy. I'd get a car. I'd feel a lot more comfortable cracking open a peanut like a G series car mechanically than I would a 993.
Okay.
I like the idea of a water-cooled daily, and if I was to do so, it'd probably be a manual 991. But I struggle with the value of the car with how expensive it is here. Sure, if there are listeners or viewers out there that feel the need to just give me the car to use, I'm okay with that as well, right? But the reality is it'll probably be a G Series 911, just finding a good one. And, I'd prefer one that someone's already spent too much money on and not recouped back because of what I'm going to pay them for it. But
100%, that's the holy grail, I think.
We'll see how we go.
The 3.2 Carrera is a lovely 911. I would say don't rule out the SC before it because
I 100% accept that. Like I've driven a lot of 3 litres, and the SC is a good car.
Yeah, and that's it. Real talky car, isn't it? The SC, particularly the later one.
There's not a lot of driving dynamic difference between the 3 and the 3.2 anyway. To me, anyway, I from the ones I've driven, but that could be reflective of the condition of the cars I've driven historically as well.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, the 3.2 Carrera did put on weight over the SC. There's no getting away from that.
We all do as we get older.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. Don't be just. I'm finding that out by the day. But yeah. And again, I as I say to everybody, 3 things you should consider when buying a car: condition, condition, condition. So if you're looking for a 3.2 Carrera, this is for any of your viewers or listeners. Just if I may give some advice, it would just be don't get hung up on if it's a 3.2 Carrera you want in this scenario. If you find a really good SC, well, look, that's absolutely the right choice then, isn't it? Rather than buying the wrong 3.2 Carrera. And none of us need a Porsche in our lives. We all have one because we want one and because, we love the cars and the culture that comes with it. Well, but if you buy a basket case or a money pit, then I'm telling you, a lot of love drains from that project pretty quickly,
Especially if it takes a long time.
Yeah, exactly that. It saps the fun out of it. So condition is absolutely the number one thing in any Porsche purchase.
Mm-hmm. Look, body wise, if Australian delivered cars or cars that were imported to Australia privately a long time ago, we don't have the weather or road issues that a lot of the Northern Hemisphere people do. So any cars that come to Australia their bodies tend to be okay. We don't, not like 356s and cars like that where you can buy one and you lift the mats and you can see the road type thing, because of the age and deterioration and no treatments of the metals and stuff like that. But body wise, it tends to be okay, but it is easy to get caught up in thinking I'll just fix this list of little things when you mention condition, and that list of little things turns into another 10, 15,000 pounds, because exactly. There's some parts on a Porsche that you go, oh geez, that's cheap considering it's a Porsche. And there are a lot of parts you go, I'm paying a premium for that because it's a Porsche.
Yeah, Porsche tax as it's known.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Come on, why can't we have more VW compatible parts?
That would be free, wouldn't it? Yeah, you're telling me. Yeah, where's this VW group integration that we keep hearing so much?
Yeah, that's right. There's not enough of it. Yeah. All right then, buddy. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. It's been great meeting you face to face and having this discussion. And I'm really enjoying the products that you're putting up for us all to enjoy, whether it's the podcast or YouTube and print still that you're getting out there. So, again, thanks for your time today, and I hope you've had fun doing this with me, just shooting the breeze.
Big time. Yeah, Mark, I have to say, like I said at the top of the chat, it's genuinely my pleasure to come on and talk about cars with you. And I have to say as well, I've really enjoyed the questions that you've put to me. That's been a really enjoyable chat. You've not been afraid to ask those questions. So from a journalist, that really resonates. It'd be nice to reciprocate the invite and for you to come on our podcast on Road to Redline. So I think it'd be really good value to have a good chat with Joe and Andy. And maybe it'll be a track day one. After
I've got no experience in it. I was just curious, you know what I mean? I don't drive on the track, so.
Yeah, I'm only joking.
Because I'm not going to do it to that. That's too pretty. Okay.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, there's more things that can go wrong than right in that scenario of the 356 on track.
Yeah, so, I don't need to be that. I don't need to be the person that said, "Oh, did you see that guy took his 356 on the track?"
Yeah. Well, this is, funnily enough, it was about 2 years ago at Silverstone. There was a Porsche Club GB track day. There was a guy in a Carrera GT went out in the afternoon, and everyone, he was poodling round. It was pretty much a parade lap, but we were just saying, "No, look, fair play," because even then, there's more that can go wrong than right with a CGT out on track. So, But like I say, let's do it. It'd be lovely to get you on Road to Redline, and genuinely, thank you for your time.
No worries. Look forward to it. Thanks very much, Lee.